So today I want to talk about disruption, and disruption is a big word at the moment. It's a hot topic at the moment. Some people may say it's even become hype now, and it's overused. But I want to talk about it in a quite practical way. So not only talk about what disruption is, and I won't spend a lot of time on that, but also what might be disrupting your business, and what are the danger points and the pressure points in your business, so that you know what you can do to tackle disruption. Obviously, we're not going to go into a whole strategy on managing it in half an hour, but it'll give you some idea of where some of the threats and the risks and opportunities might be. So let me tell you about my very first business. So when I left uni, I was working for a small software company, but then after about 8 years, I left and started my own web design business. So this was 20 years ago now. So this was one of our early websites. In fact, this was my website, First Step Communications, a couple of years after I started my business. So this in 1998, this is what websites looked like. And they're pretty basic, and it took quite a while to build a website. So for most of our clients, and you can see there's some examples of schools, financial planning there, a few other small businesses. For that, we used to charge about $5,000, and it would take about 3 months to build a website, sometimes even 6 months. But let's say 3 months and $5,000 was about the average. Then, of course, technology got a lot better, and it got to the point where I could build a website quite easily with software that was available online, and I used to run these courses called Build Your Website in 2 days. I'd get people in a room, and they would build their website themselves, a high-quality website, the kind of websites that we were building for them, but now they could do it themselves in 2 days. And we charge about, I think it's about $1,000, $1,500 for that 2-day course. And then things got better again. And I remember a couple of years ago running this webinar for members of my membership site, how to build a website in 1 hour. And the cost of that, the hosting for this site that we use called Strikingly, was about $100 a year. So we've gone from $5,000 in 3 months to 1 hour and $100. And I wonder for you, can you imagine what would happen in your business if your core business, if you're charging a lot of money and it takes a lot of time, what would happen if somebody else could come along and create something that would, that they could do it in an hour for, say, $100? So you may not know how they do it, but let's imagine that they could do it. And that's a challenge, and that's a challenge that we're facing. So how ready are you for that kind of disruption in your business? So I'm going to run a little poll here to ask you, like, how ready are you for disruption? So this is anonymous, and let me just start the poll here. And I've got these 5 levels for you, as you'll see when I launch the poll. Okay, so I'd like you to rate yourself in your business from 1 to 5 on where you are with disruption. Are you at the stage where, right down the bottom, where you just can't think about it because you're just managing to get by and keep your head above water? Do you know that it's coming, but you're going, okay, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it? Do you know that it's coming and you know what you're going to do, so you've kind of got a plan? Are you going, okay, I want to bring it on because we're ready for disruption? And the last one is that we're actually going to be the disruptors in our industry, or maybe even disrupt a completely different industry. Okay, so I can see more than half the people have voted, and I'm going to keep the poll open for a few more seconds. And okay, good, 80% of people have voted. So let me see what we've got. Okay, almost everyone's voted now. There's 91%, so let me share the results. Great. Okay, so really great to see. So we've got 80%. 80% of people are going, okay, we know the disruption's coming and we're kind of ready for it. In fact, I'm glad to see that 1 in 3 people are going, we're going to be the disruptors. Fantastic. That's great to see. So, and of course, in this group, it's a little bit self-selective because that's why you're here for this particular webinar. But let's look at what that means now. So you're ready for disruption. You're saying, bring it on because we want it, or we're going to be the disruptors ourselves. So let's see what that means for us in terms of what that means for your business. So we've done this. We've had a look at how ready you are. Let me look at how ready Australian businesses are. And there was a study from the Study of Australian Leadership that looked at leadership at work and looking at the biggest challenges that Australian leaders think that they're going to face in the next few years. And I'm going to show these 6 things to you, and then I'm going to ask you what's your biggest challenge in your business over the next 3 years. So let me show you what the study of Australian leadership found were the 6 biggest challenges that Australian leaders had. So number one is kind of the one that you probably expect, which is competition. So they're looking for getting a bigger part of the market share, but now competition is coming from other places. It's coming from online and is coming from much more international competition as well. The second one, again, is kind of the traditional sort of stuff, just operational stuff, getting stuff done. So that's a challenge. The third one is government regulation, red tape. It could be industry regulators or governments that are imposing regulations on businesses. Then this war for talent. So how do you find, recruit, and keep the best people? So that human resources, human capital issue. The next one is the one that many people think of when you think about disruption. They think about technology. But as you can see here, it's not only about technology, and that was only ranked as number 5. However, of course, it affects some of the others as well. It affects competition, and it affects talent as well, among other things. And the last one is just the uncertain environment, the risk and the uncertainty that people are facing in the business environment. Okay, so those are the 6 things that Australian leaders said were their biggest challenges. What about you? What are your biggest challenges in your business over the next 3 years? So I haven't got a poll here because I want to leave it open for you, but if you can type in the question box, what do you think your biggest challenge is going to be in the next 3 years? And I'll keep it anonymous. I'll read out the answers, but I'll keep it anonymous. So I won't say who's typed in there, who's typed in what. So what's your biggest challenge over the next 3 years? Okay, so I see a response coming in, finding new clients. Out-of-date technology. Okay, so I assume that means like the cost of making the switch over to new technology. What else? What else is coming through? Staying up to date, or staying up with the latest knowledge advances and tech advances. Great. Okay, what else? I'm going to keep this open for a bit. So recruitment and technology are two that have come through just then. Competitors using tech better than we do. Growth. Part of my business is slow, so this is ready for disruption. In the creative space. Is it too far from being disrupted? Okay, actually, no, it's not too far. In fact, you'll see in the next slide that I've got what I think is what happens with lots of businesses with growth. Ensuring people value face-to-face interaction rather than relying on online learning. Yeah, interesting. Technology, wasted time at meetings, inadequate, clear, and concise communication. Great. Okay, good. So thank you for sharing that. Let me tell you what happens with most businesses when they go through a growth curve. And this is what happens with many businesses, not only as a result of disruption, but typically it happens with businesses, and it's happened for a long time. It's just that now it's become a lot more acute and sharp. So typically what happens with a business is when it starts off, it goes through this FFF phase, which I'll tell you about soon. And it grows, and it tends to grow quite quickly because it's in that rapid growth phase. And then it gets to a point where that growth starts slowing. It might still grow, but not as quickly, and it gets into this stage, which I'm going to call SBE. And then it happens in most industries that businesses get to this point, which is this disruption point. And one of 2 things is going to happen. Either they'll continue this SBE path and they'll fail, which most businesses do in an industry, or they'll adapt and they'll switch into FFF again and they'll grow. And what you want to do is you want to be on that FFF curve rather than the SBE curve. So what does that mean? What is this FFF and SBE? Well, some of you may have heard me talk about this before. FFF means fast, flat, and free. So that's what's happening to our world at the moment. Our world is moving towards being fast, flat, and free. So fast means that we've got technology. That means that we can do things much faster. We've got innovation happening. We've got change happening faster than ever before. The second thing is that our world is flattened. In other words, we're getting rid of hierarchies, or we're throwing stones at hierarchies. We've got a lot more customer-centric business world, so customers have a lot more power than ever before. got lot more options. We're a much more global world. Whether or not you have travel bans and extreme vetting of people coming into countries doesn't matter, because the internet kind of breaks down some of those borders. And of course, we've got a lot more social power. So customers have power to talk among themselves rather than just talk to vendors and talk to businesses. And then the whole idea of free is that things that used to cost a lot now cost a lot less, and sometimes they're even free, and partly because things are digital, so it's much easier and cheaper to ship bits around with ebooks and online music, for example, rather than physical books and CDs. We can collaborate a lot more, so things become cheaper, and we can combine our resources to have greater buying power. So all of these three things are where the world is heading. And let me give you just one big example of what's happening globally with our world, because economic power is shifting, and is shifting from north to south and from west to east. So for most of the last 50 years, our world economy has been dominated by 7 countries. So the USA and Canada, the UK, France, Italy, Germany, and Japan. So these are the countries that we call the G7. And now PricewaterhouseCoopers predicts that by 2030, the power of the G7 is going to be matched by 7 other economies, 7 other countries, which they call the emerging economies, or the E7. So we've got Brazil and Mexico, Turkey and Russia, India and China and Indonesia. So 2030, which is not that far away. And then if you look ahead another 20 years, when the power of the G7 has faded, we're going to have another 7 countries, which are called the F7, or the frontier markets, which will also have that same kind of economic power. So Peru and Colombia, Nigeria and Morocco, the Philippines, Bangladesh and Vietnam. So this is what our world's going to look like a generation from now. And you can see how that power has shifted. It's definitely gone further south, and it's definitely gone further east. And that's one of the consequences of our fast, flat and free world. And the good thing for a country like Australia is that we're perfectly placed to take advantage of that shift. We're not one of those E7 or F7 countries, but we're sitting here right on the footstep of this Asian century, and we've got a lot of things that are very attractive globally. We've got, if you can imagine, anywhere in the world that you'd like to live, you'd look for a place with democratic government, a strong economy, a pretty good financial system and a stable currency, and a whole bunch of other things that make Australia a really attractive place to live if we take advantage of some of the changes that are coming. The challenge is, and this is what happens with the growth phase, is that if we look at fast, flat and free as being good, there are many businesses which are the opposite of that. And the opposite of fast, flat and free is slow, bumpy and expensive. So if you're thinking about how you can be possibly disrupted in the future, look at what's slow, bumpy and expensive in your business right now. And I'm going to give you some examples so that you can think about it for your own business. And then I'll ask you at the end, are you slow, bumpy or expensive? So let me go through some examples of what slow, bumpy and expensive means and what that means for you. Okay, and then I'll stop and ask you for any questions, and I'll also ask you, are you slow, bumpy or expensive? So let me give you an overview first of what slow, bumpy and expensive means. So slow means that if you're offering any sort of service, if it's highly technical or if it's complex, then chances are it's slow. You may not like that. For example, I'm a conference speaker. I offer a service of speaking at conferences, and that is slow. It's a slow way for people to get information. It's even a slow way for people to get entertained and engaged. So that's one of the risks in my business, and it's an opportunity for me to do something about it. Bumpy is the opposite of flat. So flat is where you break down hierarchies. Bumpy is where you've still got those hierarchies. So if you're operating in any sort of industry that's regulated, licensed, controlled, or you're forced to do, customers are forced to do things in a certain way, then it's a bumpy business. I'll give you a couple of examples later. And expensive. Do you charge a fee up front rather than charging a small monthly fee? Is it expensive for for customers to deal with you? Does it take a long time for them to get results? So that could be an opportunity for somebody. Okay, so let's look at some examples here. So let's look at slow first. So if you're offering something that's technical or complex, that could be slow. So a couple of examples here. One of my favorite examples of a slow business was video rental. So Blockbuster, it went out of business not because videotapes went out of business, because they shifted to CDs, as to DVDs and then Blu-rays, but because it suddenly became very slow to go to the store to return your to hire tapes, to hire DVDs, and then to return them. And then Netflix came along with the click of a button on an app. You could get access to pretty much the whole range of Blockbuster, but it's available to you on your app, on your TV at home. So it was one of those things that it took away that whole slow thing. And this is just one example of what's happening with a lot of retail. So a lot of retail at the moment is struggling with this, where people used to ask the question, how can we make the online experience as good as going into a shopping center and going to a shop? Now it's the other way around. How can we make the retail in-store experience as good as what people can get online? Because there's a whole bunch of friction. So you've got to drive, you've got to park, you've got to go into the shop, you've got to wait till some shop assistant who doesn't really want to serve you starts serving you. You've got to go to the checkout line and pay for your stuff. Then you've got to go and find your car in the car park. And then you've got to drive home. So it's a very slow experience. And the online experience is much faster. So this is one of the biggest challenges that retail is facing. Okay, the next one is Bumpy. So have you got a business that is highly regulated or licensed or controlled in some way, or are customers forced to deal with you in a certain way? So if that's the case, then you could be ripe for disruption. And one of the best quoted examples, of course, is the taxi industry, highly regulated, highly controlled, force customers to work in a certain way and deal with them in a certain way. And then along comes Uber that offers, well, actually it does all three of them. It offers a fast, flat, and almost, not quite free, but much less expensive service than the taxi industry did. But even if it charged exactly the same, it still reduces some of that bumpiness of the taxi industry. So it's come along and it's the poster child for disruption. Okay, the third one is expensive. So does it cost a lot of money for people to deal with you and to get the service or the product that you offer? One of my favorite examples is the idea of ECG. So cardiologists, what they used to do, if you had a heart condition, you had to go to your cardiologist regularly for checkups, and they were a series of extensive tests, and they tend to be quite expensive. Now you have this little app called a Live Core, which is something that you attach. It's a little device that you attach to the back of your iPhone, and you can do an ECG yourself from your phone at home, and the data is sent wirelessly to a remote monitoring center. It costs about $1 a day. And so suddenly something that was highly expensive and required a lot of technical knowledge can now be done by somebody who's but by any ordinary person without any technical knowledge, and it's suddenly gone from very expensive to almost free. And in some places it is free to be able to offer this. And the reason it's free is because the company that's developing this software, they reckon that in 10 years' time, they'll have enough information from millions of patients over such a long time. And so there's so much data that their software will be artificial intelligence software that will be able to predict heart attacks and strokes before they occur. This is very valuable to be able to gather that information, so valuable in fact that they can even offer the service free. Okay, so as I said, don't think of these only as threats. They definitely are threats, but also think of them as opportunities. And there are people who are taking advantage of these and turning these into opportunities. My favorite example to share is not a big company like Google or Uber or Apple, but it's these two little girls who run Charlie's Crafty Kitchen. This 8-year-old Charlie on the right and her 5-year-old sister Ashley on the left. And they have one of the world's most popular food and cooking YouTube channels. So they've set up, in effect, a video production company, because video production used to be slow, bumpy, and expensive, but because of YouTube, it's now fast, flat, and free. And they offer this free, and they get millions of visitors a month. But because they get so much traffic, they earn a little bit of pocket money through Google advertising as well. So they have turned their business, which was something that was only available to a tiny, tiny percentage of people, they've turned this into business, and they earn $140,000 per month in Google advertising. Okay, so is your business slow, bumpy, or expensive? And the question I like to ask is, think about if your business or the product or service that you offer could be done from an app. What would that mean for you? And then look at what that means. For most businesses, that means it go out of business. So those are the pressure points that you have to think about. So I'm going to ask you to do another poll now, and this is about whether your business is a slow, bumpy, or expensive. Before I do that poll, I want to share this quotation from this author Upton Sinclair, and I think it's really interesting because when I often talk to businesses about disruption, just think about what he said here. He said it's difficult to get somebody to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it. And in almost every industry I talk to, there are people who go, yes, but that's not going to happen to me, or yes, but. So financial planning, for example, robo-advice is a really big thing, whereas artificial intelligence software will be able to make better investment decisions or offer better investment advice than human advisors. And there are financial advisors who go, yes, but you'll never be able to get that personal touch. Yes, but everybody's different. Yes, but, and so on. And looking at it from outside, I think, well, yes, you're right, but also keep in mind that you're looking at it from your point of view and from what you've got a vested interest in thinking that way, and actually you're more likely to be wrong than right. So when I run this poll and I ask you to try to be objective about this, so if I ask you if your business is in some way slow, bumpy, or expensive, just think about the fact, rather than thinking about what I would lose if somebody else came along and disrupted my business, think about it objectively. If you were going to come along and disrupt your business, would you be able to do it? Okay, so let me run the poll and we'll see what you think. Okay, so let's get this second poll going. Are you slow, bumpy, and expensive? It's a very simple poll here, except that in this case that you can tick more than one box. So and you can tick the boxes. If you think that it takes a long time for people to do business with you, tick the slow box. If you think that there's some sort of regulation control or people are forced to deal with you in a complex way, then it's bumpy. And if you think that you're charging a high fee, then again, the question there is if you're charging thousands of dollars, and if just imagine that in 3 years' time, somebody will be able to offer a service where they can do what you do for $100. Okay, so we've got about half the people have voted. As you can see, you can tick more than one box here. Okay, good. I think most people have voted, so let me close the polls and show the results. Okay, so most people who voted, which was most of the people in the audience here, they say all three. And well, I'm not sure whether this says all three. It doesn't have to be, but most people are saying that their business is slow, bumpy, and expensive. So I'm really glad that the response is high here, because that's the first thing. I think for most businesses, we are slow, bumpy, or expensive, or some combination of them. So I'm not surprised, but I'm quite pleased that people are recognizing that about their business. So I do want to stop and just ask for any questions about any of what we've covered so far. I want to share this quotation, which has been attributed to a number of people. Mark Twain, probably the most common one is Josh Billings here, who said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." And it's one of the biggest challenges that we have got in business now, that it's the stuff that we know for sure, or we think we know for sure, that just ain't so. And it's not that we're wrong, it's just that the world around us has changed, so that what used to work for us, if you remember the up part of that fast, flat, and free curve, that environment around us has changed. So what used to work just doesn't work anymore. So let me just stop and quickly check if anyone's got any questions about what we've covered here. Philippe says one of my favorite quotes too. And then I'll finish up. Just got a couple of things, another thing I want to share with you before we finish up. But let me just quickly stop and check if there's any questions. Okay, so Jen says, which of these is most important, slow, bumpy, or expensive? I think all of them could be potentially risks or opportunities for your business. And so what you do is in fact, when I do my consulting with clients or help them with their strategic planning, what we do is we talk about this. We talk about slow, bumpy, and expensive, and identify all the ways that your business is slow, all the ways it's bumpy, and all the ways it's expensive. And depending on the industry, the way you tackle it is different. So there's some industries that are highly regulated. So healthcare is highly regulated, education is highly regulated, any sort of financial services are highly regulated. So it's not easy to say, okay, we can break the regulations. Not everyone can be an Uber and says we're going to operate outside the taxi industry code and then take on governments and eventually force them to change their laws because we offer such a compelling service. But it is possible in some industries for you to do that. So in healthcare, for example, there are some countries where the regulations are different. So the regulations in Australia and New Zealand are different. I think if you're a healthcare company that works in both countries, it's quite useful to use New Zealand as a test bed, as a pilot project before you launch something in Australia. And just think about if it's less regulated, then what can you do there to be innovative? And then imagine that there's going to be, say, Chinese entrepreneurs who are going to be trying to do the same thing in Australia. But it's a good place to test out if you're a highly regulated industry. So that's an example of Bumpy and how you can deal with that. Philippe says creativity can be slow and expensive, so this is ready for disruption. How do I stay ahead? Where to look for opportunities? In fact, Philippe, I think that creativity and the application of creativity, which is innovation, is one of the things that can help you become faster, flatter, and freer. And I know this, Philippe, who's asking the question, and I think you're in a great area, Philippe. It's a great growth area. If you look at applying your creativity and your innovation to any business or industry that you work with, and offering them. So I would say just the direction to take is to look at how can I make this faster, flatter, or freer, and apply your creativity and innovation that way. And then Philippe, like you already know this because you know that it all comes down to solving people's problems, and that's the way to figure out how to become faster, flatter, and freer. Any other questions? Okay, so let me finish up. There's one other quotation and one other idea I want to share with you, which is kind of following on from that Josh Billings quote. And it's this idea that rather than saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, say, if it ain't broke, break it. And this is not my idea. This is an idea that I first read more than 20 years ago when I was working in a previous life as a middle manager for a small software company in Perth. I'd just become a manager. I was reading every management and leadership book I could find at the time. And this was one of those that really resonated with me by Robert Kriegel, and that was the title of his book, If It Ain't Broke, Break It. And you can see the little quotation at the top that says it's more than entertaining reading, it's survival skills in these times of breakneck change. And this was in the 1990s, and if you think that's so much more true now than it ever was at that time. And you don't need to read the book, just take on board the title, If It Ain't Broke, Break It. So look at what's working for you and imagine that it's not just an asset, but it could also be a liability. It could also be holding you back from doing something better. So my last point is that when you start looking at these, looking at what to do, please start before you're ready. Don't wait until you've got all your ducks lined up in a row because it'll never be perfect. So get going now. And that's how you become faster, flatter, and freer. And if we had more time, I'd talk about some of the strategies about how to think like a startup. If you want to engage with me, there are broadly 3 things that I do in my business, but feel free to email me as well if you've got any questions or comments or just want to run an idea past me. The 3 ways that I offer my services are as a conference keynote speaker, as a facilitator, so I facilitate strategic planning for leadership teams. So if you're a business owner with you want me to come in and talk to your leadership team, or you're working in an organization where you've got a leadership team and you want me to talk to them about how to get ready for that future and for that disruption. And there's a 3rd thing that I've just started offering called Futurists in Residence, where I work with you for a year, and rather than just a one-off strategic planning, we'll look at will look at what's happening in your industry on a quarterly basis. So if you'd like to know more, then check it out at gihanpereira.com. There's also a box in the exit survey for you to tick to say to ask if you'd like me to contact you about any of those things. And as I said, with the exit survey, as a thank you for being here, I'll also send you my white paper, which is all about how to align your business strategy with future trends. So it talks about broadly some of the things we've talked about here, but also then looks at your strategy and gives you the 6-step process for then implementing the strategy to become future-proof. So thank you everyone for coming along to today's webinar. I'm really glad that you were here and that you took part, and look forward to seeing you in a future webinar. Thanks everyone, and bye for now.